Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Podcast Professional Dialogue. Today we have with us Mr. Nakul Duggal, the SVP and GM for Automotive at Qualcomm. Nakul, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
You talked about more of these relationships between OEMs, automotive OEMs, and technology companies like Qualcomm are going to materialize in the future, simply because OEMs need to keep up with the pace of the shift in technology. So if you talk about this, the software or the digital technology in automotive, so where do we see this going? What is the sort of need of these faster computing chips? If we talk about the nodes in terms of the nanometer technology, where are we headed? Are we going to be stuck on 40 nanometers, or we're moving towards 7 nanometers? So what's the way forward?
No, it's a very good question. So let me again use the electric vehicle analogy and kind of describe the shift that is happening. If you look at combustion engine platforms, the same platform was used to evolve the electric vehicle, the electric architecture, the EE architecture of the car for, I would say, the last 15, 20, 25 years. So, the traditional players that were involved in this space, they started off with MCUs, very simple controllers that were essentially designed to perform simple functions. And then as cars became more complicated, took on more technology, the simplest way to go solve the problem was to add one more controller. Now, these controllers were built many years ago. They were built specifically for automotive or industrial functions. They were built in older process nodes because there was no reason to really be in an advanced process node. And that was mostly the blueprint that was used to go build a car, because it was essentially a set of semiconductor suppliers who were supplying into a tier one who was building the solution and supplying into the automotive industry. As the car architecture started to shift to where automakers wanted to change the experience, they wanted to do more complicated things, autonomous driving, connectivity, higher end infotainment, integration of subsystems. Companies like Qualcomm entered and said, well, we bring a lot of technology because we need a lot of technology for our core business. So in some sense, we actually end up accelerating the pace at which the auto industry can move, because we come from a space that requires us to be current on a tremendous amount of technology that we have to build. And for us to be able to keep building that technology and update it every year, one of the things that we have to do is to keep advancing on the process node, because that's the only way that you can actually deliver in a complex product like a smartphone. So the two things that are a big advantage for us, one is access to a massive amount of technology. The other is to be forced to move the semiconductor pace to the next process node. And the approach that we took was, we basically said the products that we are building have huge applicability in automotive, because the car is looking to modernize very quickly. It can't afford to have 5, 10, 15 different such SoCs, but it doesn't need to, because we can actually bring all of this functionality into a single or 2 or 3 SoCs, and we can use software to really bring this differentiation. So as that shift started to happen, the car architecture simplified significantly from a very large number of smaller controllers to a small number of more powerful controllers. And new architectures that you are seeing today are not going to be more than 20 chips, right? You're going to have zonal controllers that will be responsible for the physicality of the vehicle, so mechatronics. So if you want to control a door or a windshield wiper or your HVAC, you'll have zones in the car, and zonal controllers will manage those zones. And then outside of that, you will have semiconductors to manage your electric motor or your powertrain or your battery management. And then everything else really is the network in the vehicle, the infotainment systems, the ADAS systems, and the connectivity. So these are not more than 15 or 16 different controllers. And this shift modernizes the vehicle, gives an opportunity for the automaker to reset the architecture, which means you don't have to pick older process nodes. You can actually move to a new process node, and makes the architecture very software centric. So you can essentially say, I'm designing an architecture that I'm designing the function to be what software can solve, and I can take the underlying hardware architecture and really abstract away from it a little bit. I think these three shifts that are happening allow the automakers to now start to think about the car in a much more modern fashion. And then everything else, process nodes, etc., those are really the tools that you use to accomplish the modernization.
And over the last 2 years, we've also seen the industry struggling with the chip shortage.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the reasons why, because the use of these different kind of node the chips of different nodes in the automotive industry, right from 40 nanometers all the way to 10 or 14 nanometers. So going forward, when do we, if you can just give an actual reality about when do we see this easing off now in the future?
Yeah. It's a complicated question because car architectures are not that uniform, right? We have a lot of different automakers that build a lot of vehicles that are of various vintages, and the chip crisis affected different suppliers in different ways, different foundries in different ways, and different process nodes in different ways. And it's a complicated situation because there is a geopolitical aspect to it. There is the availability of the skilled, the skill set that is needed to build these parts, the tools that are needed, and where the investment is going in. I think over the next, I would say, 2 to 3 years, what will happen is you will start to see a transition towards a more modern vehicle architecture that will, by definition, then be on a modern process node, on a modern geometry, on a modern supply chain. But there will also be a window of time when the legacy architecture will have to be supported. And those decisions were made many years ago, and so there is a dependency on a variety of different types of process nodes. Now, one big challenge that obviously exists is, as you are on an older process node that doesn't have a lot of demand, then it costs a lot more to keep that around. And I think what automakers are struggling with is how much of their car architecture is going to be able to move to a newer, later generation, how much will likely stay on a previous older one, and how do they go deal with that gap, that delta. We are fortunate because we have a very large semiconductor business, so we were able to manage our automotive demands quite well through the chip crisis. We didn't really have much of a challenge in meeting those demands. But I think every automaker that we work with is wisened up to what their complexity is, and they're all moving very quickly away to not find themselves in the situation again. But I don't think it is the same problem for every automaker. The ones that are, that have a very large portfolio of vehicles, are very globally deployed, sell into many different tiers of vehicles, have less flexibility. I think they'll probably have to be much more careful, make sure they get more stock ahead of time, versus some others that are more nimble.
Last question, Nakul. So, you mentioned about doubling down on the ADAS space,
Yes.
So if you can give a roadmap for the ADAS implementation specific to the Indian market, and also, in terms of your investments or your strategy that you're, sort of going to adopt going forward to enhance your business in this space.
Yes, yeah. No, that's a great question. And, this is the newest area that we are focused on. So let me break it down into kind of 3 parts. I think one is the SoC business, which is the chip business for ADAS. And one thing that has made us very successful in the automotive space is that we care a lot about the tiering of requirements for automakers. So automakers have to deal with a very wide variety of requirements. It's a price sensitive market. And we are very familiar with this because we come from this space, because in the smartphone business, you have to go deal with that all the time. So we have built a roadmap that contemplates what it takes to go build a scalable semiconductor portfolio. We have to support a lot of different software because these requirements are very varied. And over the last year and a half, 2 years, we have doubled down on also building a stack. We've acquired some capability. We have developed some capability in-house. One thing that we did that was quite unique was last year, we partnered with BMW, and that partnership was to build together an L2 plus highway pilot solution that will evolve over to an L3 solution. And this is going to happen in the next 3 to 4 years or so. 2025 is when we launch, and then we keep evolving from there. The business model that we have with BMW is that once we build a solution with them, we have rights to that product, and we can take that product and scale it to other automakers. And there are a variety of automakers, some that are looking to get more advanced and go higher up in requirements, and others that are looking to tear down on the same portfolio. So the strategy that we've adopted is, if you are an automaker who wants to build their own stack, we can support you with that model, because we build SoCs. General Motors would be a good example of someone who we do that with, or Volkswagen, who we announced recently. But if you are looking to take the entire solution from us and allow us to tear it down, we can support you with that as well. So with the India market, the approach that we're going to take is one where we're going to provide computer vision solutions that are tiered for the local market. We are also going to offer other solutions that can scale up. So for example, as BMW expands with their autonomous driving products into India, we will obviously be supporting that. As we bring that here, we would very much want to take that same platform, expand it. And we don't think about it necessarily as India. It really comes down to what are the markets that are similar in terms of requirements that we extend the capability to, and what is the right time to go do that. Where we are in full control of the product, we of course will drive that timing, but if we are working with a partner, there is a dependency on the partner as well. But the great thing for us is that ADAS in some sense is like telematics and infotainment, in that every car needs to have this capability. It is becoming regulated, it's becoming a convenience feature, it's becoming a competitive advantage. So in terms of the size of opportunity, that is no longer a question. Now it really is about readiness and prioritization, and how quickly we can bring a product to market.
Right. On that note, thank you very much, Nakul.
Thank you. Pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.